Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and my thanks to Pat and Michael and ETBI for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. As was said, the title is Developing an Entrepreneurial Culture in Education, which is pretty broad because one could talk about students, teachers, schools, the department, the system, or even given today's news, we could talk about entrepreneurial culture in trade unions. I'm going to stick with the system and talk about how we embed entrepreneurship into the system. But before I get into the main points of the discussion, I think it's important to offer some definitions. When I talk about education in this talk, I'm talking about all types of education. I'm not talking about just about primary, secondary, and third level. I'm talking about vocational education, further education, apprenticeships. I just want to make one point in the apprenticeships. I think the opportunity that lies ahead of us with regard to the reformed apprenticeship system is really important. If you look at the two countries with the lowest youth unemployment in the European Union, they are Denmark and Germany, and both of them have the strongest apprenticeship systems. And I would hope that in the reformed apprenticeship system, that entrepreneurial behavior will be part of the learning within all of that. I think one of the problems we have with the apprenticeship system is that it's not valued in the same way as the degree is. And I think until such time as we give it that same value and give that recognition to people who go through the apprenticeship system, that we value what you've achieved and we value you equally as part of society, I think the problem is going to continue to persist. In times of old, getting an apprenticeship moved you into adulthood in some way, and I think we're missing that. When I talk about teaching, I'm also talking about training. So I'm talking about teaching in the broadest sense, right? And when I talk about entrepreneurship, and this is particularly important, I am not talking only about new venture creation. We seem to be fixated in this country with understanding entrepreneurship as only being about new venture creation, that it is some sort of capitalistic training for young people. What I'm talking about with regard to entrepreneurship education is a way of thinking and a way of behaving that you can use in any part of your life. It doesn't matter what career you go into. You can be in public sector, you can be in private sector, but you can take this and bring it to your towns and villages with your sports and social clubs. I live in a small village in County Louth. A number of years ago, about 5 years ago, they built a clubhouse costing 1.2 million in a small village. It's down to 300,000 now in about 5 years. An extraordinary achievement. Now, how entrepreneurial is that? How entrepreneurial is it for a group of people to make that happen? And we don't give it due recognition in terms of entrepreneurial behavior. So what I'm talking about in terms of entrepreneurship, and my vision, Danny was talking about visions, my vision is that Ireland has an education system which allows young people, to grow up with positivity, the notion of opportunity recognition, how to gather resources, build a team, communicate, all of those valuable life skills that we need in the 21st century. So when I talk about entrepreneurship education, it's about being entrepreneurial as opposed to starting a new business. And it's important we get that right. Because when I read the Irish Times on last Tuesday and read Fenton O'Toole's article about how poverty and the potential of having low median income starts at a really young age, about how your background, your family, the chances of going through education system gets greatly diminished in the more troubled backgrounds. And I'm thinking, it doesn't have to be this way. Could we not use the education system? Could we not build in entrepreneurial behavior so it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter your background, that you can see a way forward for yourself in your life? But let's take a step back. I got 5 points to make. Why do we teach? People get into it for a variety of reasons. Job security, okay, stability. For some people, it might be the holidays. I get told every May that it must be great. I have 4 months off now. I wish. Okay. So why do we get into it? Well, my belief is the vast majority of people get into it because they have a passion for it. They want to make a difference. They want to positively enable young people to maximize their potential. And we all know this, right? We all know the influence of good teacher can never be erased. We all know the stories of people who have been dramatically influenced by particular teachers along the way. I was at a conference in America a couple of years back, and at that conference, it was an entrepreneurship conference, and one of the speakers, there was a workshop on entrepreneurship education. What does it mean to be a good entrepreneurship educator? And it was being led by 2 professors from Babson College. But one of the professors was telling a story about she was reading her student feedback forms at the end of a module. And one of the students wrote, "If I had only 1 hour left to live, I'd like to spend it in Professor X's class." And we all went, wow, imagine somebody saying that about you. And then she said, yeah, I thought the same, but then I continued reading. And the rest of the sentence said, because she makes it feel like a lifetime. So, what are we there for? We're trying to maximize people's potential. But if we're being honest about it, we're restricted in terms of curricula, we're restricted in terms of ensuring that they pass exams. Okay? And from the earliest age, they're being monitored in terms of exams. And of course, it comes to its worst at the Leaving Cert. But we all know that some students aren't academically minded, and some aren't very good at exams. And we also know that life is the most difficult exam. And as it says here, many people fail because they try to copy others, not realizing that everyone has a different question paper. So how do we educate people in terms of living life and being entrepreneurial and maximizing their potential? We did a project in a disadvantaged area in Dublin where we were looking to introduce entrepreneurship to the young people there and use it as a tool to enable them to find jobs or even start up their own business. And one of the things we discovered very quickly was that they had very clear role models in that community around entrepreneurial behavior. And these role models were highly entrepreneurial, highly successful, and highly illegal. We're talking drug dealers. Showing all the attributes of entrepreneurial behavior, but in a way society would rather not. So how do we turn those people away from that kind of entrepreneurial activity into activity that we would prefer? When a student comes into my class, I have a particular philosophy that I use, right? A number of years ago, I read a quote by the Greek philosopher Plutarch, who said, "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be ignited." And when someone comes into my class, that's what I'm trying to do. I tell my students, if you're here to get 40%, you're in the wrong classroom. Because, by the way, 40% means you do not know 3/5 of the course. Would you fancy going to a doctor who got 41% in their finals? So, I'm saying to them that at the end of the program, what I want to achieve is not that you'll start a business, but that you'll understand what it means to be entrepreneurial, and that you will use that entrepreneurial ability or capacity within you, because we all have it, to make the most of your life. And the benefits of this course will not be passing the exam, but will be years from now when you're using all of those skill sets. So teaching entrepreneurship has changed dramatically. In the 20 years I've been doing it, we now have moved quite dramatically away from what we were doing. A couple of interesting trends. More students now want to take entrepreneurship. Far more females are now taking entrepreneurship option. In recent years, the majority of some of my classes have been female students. And the majority of the students now believe that one day they will start their own business. All positive trends. But we struggle with two key misconceptions. Because generally society tells us entrepreneurs are born, not made. Can I tell you that is completely wrong? Okay? It is wrong. There are people out there who are naturally attracted to entrepreneurship, what we call pull entrepreneurs. But the majority of people who start the business are push entrepreneurs. People who start the business because of life circumstances, because they got pushed into it in some way. And the second misconception is that you have to be highly creative. Actually, the vast majority of businesses that get started are based on ideas that already exist. So you don't have to be creative, and you don't have to be born with a special gene that says you are an entrepreneur. The great management guru Peter Drucker said, entrepreneurship is neither a science nor an art, it is a practice. He also said, most of what you hear about entrepreneurship is all wrong. It is not magic, it is not mysterious, it has nothing to do with genes. It is a discipline, and like any discipline, it can be learned. And one of the reasons I love working in the area of entrepreneurship education is you can work with people of all backgrounds, all ages, all abilities. Back in 2006, I established the Institute for Minority Entrepreneurship within DIT. And we work with immigrants, traveller community, people with disabilities, and probably the most fascinating experience I've ever had was when I delivered a Start Your Own Business program inside a prison. My opening line to the participants was, well, you've already demonstrated one key characteristic of entrepreneurship, a willingness to take risk. But when we talk about entrepreneurial behavior, this is being inclusive of all our communities, of all the people in our society. It's not about creating wealth for a few people. It's about, like I set up the Institute for Minority Entrepreneurship because these communities were being left behind during the Celtic Tiger years. And I wanted to enable them to maximize their economic and social potential. And I felt that this was one way in which we could do that. Ask yourself, right? Ask yourself, how many courses exist in this country for start your own business for people with disabilities? Right? We offer vocational training for people with disabilities about getting employment. Okay? And yes, surely an option would be self-employment. Okay? But so there's so many wonderful things. So the traditional notion of entrepreneurship has been this. Okay? It's the notion of the entrepreneur as this heroic person, developing a business plan, good at marketing, finance, okay, management, project management, all that kind of stuff. Some sort of business focus. This business person, right? But in entrepreneurship education now, this is the way we think of an entrepreneur or someone behaving entrepreneurially. And if you look at the characteristics here, it's about intuition, vision, cognition, trust building, okay, values, entrepreneurial organization, design, development, management in different contexts, emotional intelligence. And when I look at that model, that's a model that can apply in any element of our education system. That's a model of our young people that I would love to see coming through. Because it doesn't matter what you do in life, you can apply these attributes. Imagine our young people leaving the education system at whatever age, blessed with these abilities. So basically what I'm saying is that entrepreneurship should not be a subject. Okay? I'll say that again. It should not be a subject. And I think some stakeholders are fixated or believe that we should business subjects, in primary, secondary, and third level and all the rest of it. I don't see it that way. I see entrepreneurial behavior being inculcated across all subjects. So, for example, I was reading with my kids last night. I bought a book, I saw it last week and I bought it. Chicken Soup for the Soul for Kids, right? That's about positive stories for kids, right? In our reading lists, could we not have that as a book, right? When we do maths, can we have maths projects, okay, that maybe have something to do with business or even social enterprises? When we look at projects, it doesn't have to be subject related. It can move across all subjects because we're talking about skill sets and attributes. But what is important is that it starts in primary and moves right through the education system. And that people understand and realize that this is how their skill sets are being developed. Okay? And not only should we not have a subject, but we should not have a flag to go with it. This is an entrepreneurship school, right? Like seriously, if schools get any more flags, they'll be like the outside of the United Nations building. Okay? This should be natural. This should be, the norm. That this is what they get as part of our education system. And this is how we've changed over that time, right? And I'm not going to go through all of this, but just to give you some examples. In my classes, where possible, I've got rid of exams. I have no exams. Students love that, right? But instead, what do they have to do? Well, practically every class has got to run a charity event. In groups of 3, they organize themselves, they self-select groups of 3, they self-select their own charity, they self-select their own event, and they go make it happen. And trust me, we have disasters, right? But failure is part of the learning process. And in the last 10 years that we've been doing this, the students have raised in excess of £500,000 for various charities. Plus, they've understood that behaving entrepreneurially can help people in a disadvantaged situation. They do consultancy work with social enterprises. They run market stalls. Okay? And okay, some of them do business plans and others present to venture capitalists. But we do lots of experiential learning rather than sitting in an exam hall saying the answer to question 1 is. So, how does entrepreneurship education benefit us? Question I get asked very, very often. Can I ask each of you, if you're doubting the benefit of entrepreneurship education, get a copy of this report. It's called Entrepreneurship Education, A Road to Success. And you can download it on the internet. Okay, it comes from the European Commission, and I've also got there the website where there's lots of other reports. But the European Commission earlier this year published this report, and it is packed full of evidence of the benefits of entrepreneurship. For example, in Denmark, which would be my favorite country for analysis, what they've found is young people, kids in primary school who've taken entrepreneurship education attend better, perform better in class, interact better with their peers, interact better with their teachers, okay? And just generally outperform those who haven't taken entrepreneurship education. Now, I'm not talking about starting a business, right? I'm talking about while they're in school, they interact better and they attend better. Helps boost career ambitions, higher employability, okay? Those are all the individual benefits. Institutional benefits, develop a stronger entrepreneurial culture, higher engagement of teachers, okay? And then we go on to the impact on the economy. Supports higher rates of startups and creates successful ventures, positive economic impact, and then the impact on society, protects against social exclusion. For example, I was talking there about immigrants and about travelers and people with disabilities and ex-prisoners. That's how we've used it, okay, to combat social exclusion. So there's lots of evidence already available showing us how entrepreneurship education benefits people at individual, institutional, the economy, and society. So this is the way I see entrepreneurship education. Entrepreneurship education is the iceberg. At top is entrepreneurship in terms of new venture creation. But underneath, what we've got is entrepreneurial or enterprising behavior. So, what are we doing currently? Well, I'd like to reassure you, we're doing lots of stuff that's really good. I've got some photos here. For example, the top one there on the right is from the Junior Entrepreneurship program, which was founded by Jerry Kennelly down in Kerry and has now been run across the country. I was at the finals in County Louth earlier this year, and to see the energy in the hall that day as they presented all of their projects, and they talked about what they had done and how they had created teams and how they engaged with the local community. The energy was fantastic. But again, I find this repeatedly, okay? When you give young people the environment, they will respond. They will do wonderful things if you trust them to do it. The top left is the winner of the Local Enterprise Office's Student Enterprise Competition this year. 20,000 students into that competition this year, and the finals were held in Croke Park. Fabulous if you can ever get along to see it. And at the bottom we've got the third level Enterprise Ireland Student Enterprise Award. Okay, 450 teams from across the country into that this year. So the positives are there's increased provision of entrepreneurship education in recent years. There's a large number of excellent initiatives taking place across all education levels. And one of the ones they picked out there was the Edison program, which Joan Russell, I'll have to tell her. Will you tell her I said she's doing great? But it's a really exciting program. And I saw the results when I was judged down in Cork in June. Fantastic. We've got a large number of passionate stakeholders and champions. We've got access to fabulous support materials. One of the ones I picked here is a company in Cork called Fab Education. They've got an online, they've got a website where financial management made easy. Okay, if you've got students that are struggling to understand finance, okay, this is it. And the one thing I love about it is you don't need to be a qualified accountant, okay, to use it and to understand finance. It's excellent. And we've got a large number of actions currently being taken to provide further entrepreneurship, and as our next speaker will tell us, a lot is happening in the junior cycle. So there's lots of really good things happening. There's lots of really good initiatives and lots of positives. But it is highly fragmented. We have no idea. We have no idea where the overlaps are. We have no idea where the gaps are. And what's urgently needed is a mapping of the provision of entrepreneurship education across all our education system. Last September, I was at a forum in the Department of Education on entrepreneurship education, and every group that was there said, can we please have a mapping of what happens? Earlier today, somebody said to me, do you know what's happening in the following area? I said, look, I follow this I track all of this really closely, and I couldn't tell you. I can give you some idea, but I can't give you the detail. We're lacking a clear sense of purpose and direction. And basically, what we don't have is a national entrepreneurship education strategy the way countries like Denmark, Norway, Finland, and other countries have. What we got is lots of initiatives, but no overall action. We are not meeting the needs of the Action Plan for Jobs for 2015 or the National Policy Statement on Entrepreneurship in Ireland, or the Entrepreneurship Forum report, which became before that. And we need to offer entrepreneurship education to a wider number of students throughout the entire education system. And we've got to be realistic here. We've got to find the solution to all of this given financial constraints and other challenges, particularly around embracing change that might exist with certain stakeholders. Some government reports, and I'm going to just highlight some of these. The Entrepreneurship Forum, which was chaired by Sean O'Sullivan, was on that forum. But recommendation number 1, develop a national entrepreneurship education strategy covering all levels of the education system. National Policy Statement on Entrepreneurship 2014, develop guidance for schools to enhance enterprise and education. Action Plan for Jobs, broaden and deepen work to support entrepreneurship in schools. You might notice a trend here. But this trend, this call for action, has been going on for 15 years now. The Goodbody Report in 2002, the Enterprise Strategy Report in 2007, Small Business Forum before that, have all said entrepreneurship education across the entire system needs to be coherent and needs to be offered to as many students as possible. Just last week, the Global Entrepreneurship Ireland report, Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Ireland report was launched. And it said, of the 9 framework conditions, entrepreneurial education at primary and secondary level was rated as the weakest. So what actions need to be taken? My favorite action, my favorite example is Denmark. I think what they're doing there is fantastic. A number of years ago, as you can see here, the strategy for education and training and entrepreneurship has been developed through collaboration between the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Economic and Business Affairs. They also included every level across the entire system, and they also included the business community. It was a real holistic approach to the challenge. And their strategy is quite simple. You can download this report if you're interested. It's only 14 pages. And it clearly sets out what Denmark is going to do. And already they're tracking the students on a longitudinal basis, and they're seeing the results in the schools. They're seeing immediate reaction when they didn't expect anything for years. And again, I'll come back to, we're not talking about startups. The vision of the Danish government was to give pupils and students an introduction to entrepreneurial thinking, to develop pupils and students' knowledge of entrepreneurship, and to develop the ability of pupils and students to act entrepreneurially. And that last one is my favorite. To develop the ability of pupils and students to act entrepreneurially. Again, I'll come back to, that could be in any context in their life. So what should we do? Well, actually, I'll be perfectly honest, I thought the IBEC report was excellent. And again, if you haven't read that, you can download that on the internet, and it's about 16 pages. Packed full of useful recommendations. So 16 recommendations, I've just highlighted one, or some of them. What they don't have, and I've put this in red, I think we got to start by mapping the current activities initiatives. We got to start there. And then broadly, what the report was saying, develop, implement and deliver an entrepreneurial education policy. I think I've said that already. Promote experiential learning at all education levels. Provide professional development and opportunities for educators to encourage entrepreneurial thinking. Inspire the student, or encourage and reward the role of business and civic society, and implement a coordinated approach to national policy. We're not asking for any more than that. So, if we do that, this is what happens. If we implement policy strategies that enable entrepreneurship education across the entire system, what you'll finish with is employment where entrepreneurship alumni are more successful employees with higher incomes, and your startup rates among entrepreneurship alumni are higher, and businesses have a higher turnover rate and operate in more innovative sectors. Everybody wins. So I'm beginning to get really frustrated by why we're waiting to make this happen. I don't understand, if all of this benefit is accruing, why we're not doing something to make this happen in a coordinated, coherent fashion. And again, I'll come back to the fact that there are lots of good initiatives. Danny, I wasn't flattering you by adding this quote. It just happens that I completely agree with you. We aim to change the thinking around entrepreneurship for young people to view it as a culture, a philosophy, a permanent theme across education rather than a standalone subject. I would fully endorse that. And Danny and I met today for the first time, so it's not like we planned this. Actually, Danny, the only thing I disagree with you on is you could never create another Cork. But Danny was talking earlier about vision. This is my vision, okay, of an Ireland where young people come through our education system with these attributes. And as I look around the room, I know there are people here who go, it'll never happen. But let's finish with the words of George Bernard Shaw. Some men see things as they are and ask why. Others dream things that never were and ask, why not? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. That was a very interesting presentation. We have a very short time for questions. We're under a bit of time pressure because the Minister has decided that she's going to be here at 4:15. So we're going to forego the break, and we're going to have Gary O'Donoghue whenever he comes into the room. Oh, Gary's there, sorry. So we just have a couple of questions for Professor Cooney, and then we'll move into the next presentation, which will be truncated. It will have to stop at 4:15. The Minister has to make it to the RT studios at 6 o'clock. I'm sure you all have your Twitter machines on, and you know that the ASTI have rejected the junior cycle proposals. So, Thomas?
Yeah.
Yep, you ready for questions? Any questions for Thomas?
One at a time.
Don't all rush.
That's great. I'm around until 6 o'clock if anybody wants to talk to me.
Yeah, Katie has a question.
Yeah.
Just wait a second, Katie. Katie? Can you just repeat that? Katie,
yeah, I just want to acknowledge, I've read a lot of your material and just want to acknowledge all the great recommendations and the great thinking and the great work that you're doing in the area of entrepreneurship education.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate
and I
that.
very much enjoyed your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. As
Thank
I say,
you.
I'm around until 6 o'clock. If anyone wants to meet, I'm happy to talk. Okay, thank you very much.